So in Season 11 of Diablo 4, I've actually gotten quite unlucky when searching for mythics, so in this video we're going to be going over a pulverized druid build using no mythics. You're able to do pretty much all of the endgame content. You'll see footage in this video of me pretty easily doing an 80 pit, all without mythics, so this build will be pretty easy to gear towards, and then you can just get significantly stronger as you start to get your mythics. Now starting off, we should go over our uniques because we are using 4 different uniques. First off, Vasili's Prayer, the specialist, your earth skills are now also werebear skills and fortify you based upon your max life. So a bunch more fortify, which we already have a ton of. And then we don't actually get a lot of additional scaling through the special effect, but this does have really good stats on it, especially the defensives, and the percent willpower is really good for damage increase. We're using Insatiable Fury, so werebear form is now your true form, so you're just always in werebear, which helps to keep up some of our buffs. And then we get increased ranks to all of our werebear skills, so just more damage. This then has a lot of defensives, and then the increase to our capstone is also pretty good for more damage as well. Then we are currently using Temerity, and this is specifically for more defensive. If you feel like you're tanky enough, you can use something like Tybalt's Will, but Temerity is actually quite good for defensives in this season. Just gives a bunch of defensive stats, and then you constantly have quite a big barrier with all of our different ways of healing. So you can really use whichever one of those you want, but early on I think Temerity is good just because of the defensive aspects. Then finally, and the most important, is Rotting Lightbringer for our weapon. So the special is anytime you pulverize, you spawn a puddle on the ground that poisons enemies that walk in it, but then if you pulverize again anywhere near those puddles, it'll explode and send out all these small projectiles that all overpower. So that's a main way you play around this build. Pulverize to put a puddle down, then you pulverize close enough to that puddle so it splashes and has guaranteed overpowers that deal a ton of additional damage. And you can also set it up to where you're close enough to multiple puddles so they all splash, so you're just multiplying the damage you can deal. This is a large part of our build's overall damage from this one unique. But that brings us into our skill tree, starting with our abilities, and there's been a change with Season 11 where you only need 1 point into your basic skills to get lower into the tree. So you're going to be going into Claw. This is actually important because Claw allows you to go into Werewolf, then back into Werebear to be able to stack up one of our passives. Then going down 5 points into Pulverize, our main damaging ability. Upgrade 1, Pulverize deals increased damage to CC'd enemies and bosses. Upgrade 2, every 10 seconds, Pulverize is guaranteed to overpower, and enemies take more damage from that overpower. Then we're going down 1 point into Cyclone Armor, which is non-physical damage reduction. If you put this on your bar, even if you're in Grizzly Rage and can't activate it, you still get the defensive aspect of this. Then 1 point into Debilitating Roar, makes enemies around you deal less damage. And then upgrade 1 fortifies you a lot, which is actually really good now. Then upgrade 2, when this is active, we deal pretty heavily increased damage. Then we're going down 1 point into Trample. This is mainly for some movement, and it makes us unstoppable because we can't be in Grizzly Rage 100% of the time. And because there's so much CC with the new elites, you definitely want Trample. Then 5 points into Grizzly Rage to reduce the cooldown, increase the duration, and the 5 point upgrade to this now just reduces its cooldown. Upgrade 1 makes us unstoppable while it's active. Upgrade 2, we fortify a bunch every second while it's active, and the amount of fortify you get from this while it's active is absolutely ridiculous compared to all other fortify in the game now. Then we have our passives. 1 into Heart of the Wild to get 3 into Wild Impulses. Your core skills cost more but deal more damage. We have 3 into Iron Fur for damage reduction, WoW, and Werebear, which is pretty massive damage reduction, especially how much more rare just pure DR is now. Then 3 into Intentional Fortitude, increased non-physical resistances. Then we're going down, we're getting 3 into Nature's Reach, increased damage to distant enemies, more damage if they are CC'd. 3 into Feral Aptitude, you deal increased damage while healthy, even more damage when you're above 100% move speed. We have 3 into Mending. This is primarily for the increased max life, but the increase to healing also helps our Temerity if you're using that. 1 into Provocation, so every 10 seconds our next skill will overpower. 3 into Crushing Earth skills do increase damage to CC'd enemies. 3 into Stone Guard, while fortified, your Earth skills deal more damage. 1 into Safeguard, crits with Earth skills fortify you. It's for a low amount, but when you're hitting so many things, this can stack up pretty heavily. 1 into Neurotoxin, poison enemies are slowed. This will also proc a bunch of other effects because we poison everything, so now everything is slowed at all times. 3 into Toxic Claws, you deal increased poison damage. Then 3 into Envenom, you deal increased critical strike damage against poisoned enemies. Then we're going down 3 into Defiance, nature skills do increased damage to elites. 3 into Natural Disaster, your skills do increased damage to vulnerable enemies. 3 into Circle of Life, our Pulverize will heal us for 3% of our max life, healing us a lot but also stacking up our Temerity. Then our final point is in Resonance, just increased nature magic damage as well. Then 3 into Quick Shift, shapeshifting into a new animal form gives gives increased damage stacking up. So how you use this is use your claw basic skill or click your teleport button. That'll take you into werewolf or into human form, then pulverize to go back into werebear. This will stack up. Once it's stacked up 6 times, you will either be in Grizzly Rage or just in werebear all the time, so it'll stay stacked. Then heightened senses. While shapeshifting, werebear gains you damage reduction, werewolf increased movement speed, and these will both stay when you're in any animal form. Then finally, we have Urzine strength, increased max life, increased damage, and increased overpower damage while in werebear, so that'll be all the time. This is also increased by our unique chest piece. But that brings us to our Paragon boards, and this will change a bit as I level up my glyphs more, which I've been neglecting doing a bunch, but also there may be some more optimizations as we get into our mythics, and maybe we can change around some points, but there'll be a build planner in the description if you want to follow point by point. But starting off, we have Fang and Claw on the first board. Once I level this up, this will have enough points to get the secondary, but this is a bonus to magic nodes within range, and the secondary is increased damage while in werebear for close enemies, and then once you get the legendary, it's increased shapeshift damage. Then the first board we're taking is survival instincts. So while in werebear, you deal increased damage that's increased at full life, and you deal increased overpower damage from the difference of life between you and the enemy. So you stay high life, they get lower, you deal more damage. The glyph we're taking is earth and sky, a bonus to magic nodes within range. The secondary is nature skills do increased damage to CC'd or vulnerable enemies. The legendary is increased nature magic damage. Then we have up, down, left, right, and until you start to get your mythic, specifically your mythic chest piece, the direction may matter because you can get the secondary of some of the rare nodes depending on which board you go first. I don't think it's going to matter that much, so just really go whichever direction you want. But starting at the left, we have heightened malice. While an enemy is poisoned near you, deal increased damage. This stacks up for more enemies. The glyph is dominate, so increased overpower damage. The secondary is when you overpower an enemy, they take increased damage from you. The legendary is increased overpower damage. Then we go all the way over to the right, which is constricting tendrils, deal increased damage to poisoned enemies, and then a lucky hit. Nature skills have a 40% chance to poison quite a lot of damage of the initial hit, so this poison can be a decent bit of damage. The glyph we're taking is spirit, so increased critical strike damage. The secondary, when you crit enemies, they take increased damage from you, stacking up. The legendary is increased critical strike damage. Then we're going up and we're taking Earthen Devastation. Your earth skills deal increased critical strike damage, and then the glyph we're taking is Headhunter, which is a bonus to normal nodes within range. The secondary is increased damage to elite. The legendary is just increased damage. Then we have our spirit boons. So we have Gift of the Stag, increased max spirit, but we primarily want it for the gain 10 spirit per second. This is quite a lot of regen. Then we have swooping attacks for increased attack speed, Avian Wraith for increased critical strike damage. If you're earlier on and you have really bad crit, you can go Scythe Talons over swooping attacks, but I think the attack speed is generally better. Then we have Energize, lucky hit, dealing damage has a 50% chance to restore 100 spirit. This is close to just all of our spirit, but this is a big way in which we keep our spirit up, especially with one of the rune sets we're using. Then I'm currently using Combo for the Storm, which is a lucky hit. Nature skills have a chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate. Now they changed how our ultimate worked, so now when we're in Grizzly Rage, we can't reuse it when in Grizzly Rage, and we can't reduce the cooldown when we're in Grizzly Rage. So after it ends, then the cooldown starts. So we can't be in it 100% at a time. This just allows us to get back into it much more quickly. I know a lot of people are using Masochistic, which is just another way to fortify. I think we have enough fortify. What you can also do is use Obsidian Slam if you're in something like Infernal Hordes, where maybe there are ranged enemies that you want to kill quickly, but may not die to just a normal long-ranged Pulverize. But with Obsidian Slam, you can get more overpowers on your normal Pulverizes, which could help specifically with something like Infernal Hordes. And then for our seasonal powers, this isn't super important for some of these, but in the top section, we're using Essence of Lies, so you fortify 1% of your max life per second, a good amount more fortify. We're using Essence of Squalor for the left section. This section doesn't really matter. You either refill potions or you gain a barrier after being injured. Neither of them are super important, but then the bottom section and the right section are, I'd say, the most important. The bottom section, Essence of Sin, you gain 20% increased armor, which is pretty big. Then Essence of Screams to the right, gain 20% increased resistance. So both of those are going to be really big. The other two, not super important, but the fortify per second is nice. But that then brings us into our gear, starting with our gems and our runes. In 2 pieces of armor, you just want increased willpower. Then you have on your weapon and another piece of armor your rune sets. Now, one of them, especially earlier on when you don't have optimized gear, I'm using Cast a Non-Channel Core skill, so just our Pulverize, and this gains us increased critical strike chance up to 10 stacks for 25%. This will allow us to get a lot more crit really easily because you just get a stack for every Pulverize and you keep it stacked up for a lot of additional crit, because unless you're super well rolled gold, you're not going to have even close to 100% crit. Then the other set, which can be annoying, is I'm using up to 100% chance against non-healthy enemies, which you need to proc 27 times, but this can proc quite a lot. And then the other side of the rune is casting a skill other than a basic or defensive consumes all of your primary resource to increase your damage by up to 100% for 1 second. Now, the reason I don't like this is because until you have something like your mythic ring of Starless Skies to massively reduce your spirit cost, when this procs, you'll usually have to wait for some of your spirit to come back to pulverize again. So even though you do a lot of additional damage with this, it can be annoying to use. So you can change out the set for something else until you have better spirit management or reduction, specifically once you get Ring of Starless Skies. And then in our jewelry, I'm just using all resist to all gems. Now, if you feel like you need more armor or need some specific resistance, you can change these up. It's really just getting more defensives. And armor is just pure DR now, so that could also be good to get in here. But I think for right now, just getting all resist to all has been better for me. But again, depending on what your build is, what stats you have, you can change these up. But then that brings us to our legendary aspects. So on our necklace, we have critical strikes with Grizzly Rage, increase your damage by 3% up to 180 if you have a max roll. So this was changed from what it previously was, but this should basically be up 100% of the time. You should stack it up pretty quickly and then it'll just stay up for a massive damage increase. Then for our other offensive aspects, you can put them anywhere you want, doesn't matter. But we have Pulverize, creature shockwave that travels forward, does a bunch of damage in its path. So Pulverize now does the small AoE on the ground and a big Pulverize behind it, so you can kill enemies at range. Then your core skills deal up to a 75% increased damage based upon your fortify. And then on our final, we have you deal increased poison damage by quite a lot. And while shapeshift, your direct damage is converted into poison damage. So not all of our damage from anything we have when we are shapeshifted into anything, so this will be up all the time, is now all poison damage, allowing us to scale a lot more. And then finally on our boots, Pulverize is now an earth skill primarily for more scaling. After it overpowers, the earth skills are reduced as well, but this doesn't really affect anything in this build. Now, some of your important stats are going to be on one of your rings. You want a chance to make enemies vulnerable. That's how you're going to make enemies vulnerable. Also for our temperings on our rings, I have Grizzly Rage Duration, which is just incredibly nice to stay in it a bit longer because we can't have it up 100% of the time. And then on a lot of our other temperings, you do Pulverize Size just to make the build significantly easier to use, and you can just hit a lot more things. And I will have all the stats in the build, but there are definitely a lot more ways to stat out your items in this season because there's now 4 affixes on your legendaries. And with the sanctification, there's just so many different ways. You could get a bunch of like crit sanctifies and maybe be able to change out your runes, or get a bunch of other sanctifies to be able to change out a stat on a piece of gear. So there's definitely a lot of changing depending on where you're currently at, especially before we get our mythics. But that's the entirety of this non-mythic Pulverize build. Still incredibly strong, but we're going to get massive power increases once we get our mythics. And I will be doing update videos once I more optimize this build. But still your classic Pulverize build. You just sit in Grizzly Rage, you pulverize everything, you destroy your whole screen. But that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.